My name is Jessica, and we're going to be taking a look at session 4 this week in regards to forecasting and different financial analysis options. Just looking at um, the overview, I apologize, so we'll be looking at different analysis types, trends versus comparative, forecasting information approaches, and then assumptions in forecasting when it comes to revenue. The first thing we're going to be looking at is trend analysis versus comparative analysis. The two are used for similar items, and we'll take a look at how they are similar here in just a second. But looking at them separately, trend analysis looks for patterns or consistency in financial data. Usually done, you can do it up to 3 years at a time, but it's always done horizontally. So it is always, you are looking straight across the board with each one of these. It can help predict future success or future loss based on trends from previous days, previous months, previous years, and different items such as that. Versus the comparative analysis, which compares, typically you're looking at about 2 different pieces or 2 different years worth of data. You can do a little bit more, but typically you're looking at current year versus prior year when it comes to financial statements. That also can show loss or gain between different periods of time. You can do comparative analysis, either horizontal or vertical comparisons, and usually a ratio calculation is used when computing different factors for the comparative analysis. Like I said before, they are also similar in different ways. So both are used to plan upcoming year budgets as well as evaluate the current year financials. They use the same financial statements and documents for their analysis. So one doesn't require something different than the other. It just depends on what pieces of information or how what you're trying to do, whether you're comparing 2 separate years or trends, would define which type of analysis you would do. And then both are necessary tools to have a clear picture and understand the success or struggles of for financially for a company. I would like to use a real life experience with this only because I do run a large center here in Colorado, and analysis of my business is something that we do every single day. So trend wise, I use this to look at trends for my year. We are given a budget at the beginning of each year, and it predicts what we should look like each month. I mean, it predicts it down to how many new injuries we should see each month, how many rechecks we should see each month, how many staff should I have in a month, how many hours or employee hours and FTEs should be looking at, and efficiencies wise where we should be, and how much each visit should be charged. It gets very, very in depth. So what I will tend to do is I will take previous quarters and take a look at my year as a whole and say, okay, we are currently trending to hit budget, or we're currently trending to not hit budget. Where are we at when it comes to our revenue? Where are we at when it comes to staffing? Are we seeing that different spots within the year varied from what they were supposed to? What could potentially be leading to that? And it helps us to take a look at what we may expect to end the year like, versus the trend for the year thus far. So if we're trending to beat budget, awesome. Why are we trending? Where does that, what are the trending numbers or the trending factors? Comparatively, I use my financials each year to take a look at where we're at year to date, and what the last year looked like. So for example, when I ended my 2018 year, I pulled out my 2017 budget and I looked at numbers for each one, and we saw a 26% growth in our 2018 financial year. I have done that this year as well. So I look at my current year versus my 2019. 2018. We're only looking at about a 3% growth. But in 2 years to have that's a 29% growth in 2 years is pretty incredible. But without the data from the previous years, we really wouldn't be able to look at the growth of our company, or I'm sorry, of our center. We also do it to compare it to other centers and our size versus others in the market. We are titled the second largest center in the state, but without being able to compare our data to that of the other center, we wouldn't know. We are about 20% smaller than the other center. So basically for every 5 patients that they see, we see 4. So there's your ratio, or a 4 to 5 when it comes to our volume, and compared to providers, the same thing. They have 20% more providers, and they're open 20% more time a year than we are. So we don't use it simply to look at our financial or our growth or our clinic specifically, but we do compare to other centers, and we look at it for trend as a market, or trend analysis for the state as well, to figure out whether we are going to be successful this year or whether we may struggle overall as a state, and what that may impact or look like in the future. Forecasting is something that I use on a weekly basis. It's helping to look at what is coming. It's based solely on assumptions, and it's usually relatively short term. And according to our text, and I really like the way that they said this, it's expectations based on realistic assumptions. So forecasting approaches, or there's different ways to get information for forecasting, and different sources of information to really be able to make the best assumption, or the best analysis, and the best prediction. So the first one is, it's personnel derived. So that would be, for instance, myself in my center, knowing my business, I'm the best source of information for it. I'm in the heart of the matter every single day, and I'm the closest source with direct access and experience with the situation. I like to say that nobody knows my center better than I do. So this is, I can speak to my clinic, I can speak to the trends, I can speak and I can compare, and I can forecast based on how well I know my clinic. Now, the problem with that at times is if there's a change in leadership suddenly, and the person coming in doesn't know it as well, if the person isn't as well versed or not as knowledgeable, and if the person who is the personnel that it's coming from may not have taken, or may not be as engaged or involved as they need to analyzing it, and so they may not be able to answer it the best way. So that's one of the downfalls of using personnel derived. Level 2 would be electronic and statistical. So that's pulling electronic reports. It is breaking it down into numbers. Now, it's always said that numbers do not lie. I wholeheartedly agree. However, the problem is that if a report has not been developed for the number that you want to look at, or the statistic that you want to look at, that can limit your ability to utilize that as information. It also, if the report is not ready, say it's created, it's electronic, but it's managed versus system managed, then it could depend on whether the individual has been able to complete it and what the availability of that report is. Forecasting for the third level would be that of executive level judgment. This one, for me, working in the corporate world, is full transparency, is frustrating. Executive level judgment means that those above me looking at my center and making assumptions based on a set of numbers or based on a report or an analysis that they ran versus actual time in the center. So they create budgets or they create financial predictions and expectations based solely on I hate to say it, but solely on a spreadsheet, and not necessarily firsthand experience within the clinic. So it's absolutely within their right to do so, but at times for directors like myself, it can be frustrating because we often feel like numbers rather than the actual experience and knowing our centers, and what they need. Assumptions in revenue forecasting. So this is just part of what can attribute to it. So there are 5 different assumptions in forecasting there that can affect your revenue. So utilization or significant changes to utilization. For me, working in an occupational medical center, a lot of our business is based on new injuries. Sometimes it's based on, say, construction projects that are going on and the injuries coming in from them, or weather-based where slip and fall injuries are really heavy in the winter. But if the weather isn't bad and we're not seeing as many, that can affect the utilization. Patient mix assumptions, just payment or insurance. So are they state funded? Are they privately funded? Are they paying for it out of pocket and considered a private payer? Contractual allowances, just that. So that's meaning the difference in reimbursement from insurance payers. So the reimbursement from Medicaid or Medicare may differ from that of Aetna or from Blue Cross Blue Shield, but it also may differ for work comp insurances. So a company like Pinnacle versus Travelers versus Sedgwick, their rates may differ based upon the contractual obligation that they've agreed to. Trend analysis and assumptions based on previous trends, identifying relative information current to assumptions. That would be the only concern, is making sure that you are comparing correct trends and you're not trying to compare, say, well, my summer is going to look like this based off of my winter. That may not always be the correct way to review something. And then you have your payer change assumptions. So each year, those contractual allowances and the reimbursement from insurances can change. So this year they may say I'll cover 80%, but next year they may say, okay, we're only going to cover 75. So don't base your assumptions this year off of last year's payer, because it can differ just slightly. And then when it comes to capacity, so that's meaning our productivity and how many patients we're able to see basically in the healthcare field. There are a couple of things to keep in mind when looking at these. Now, the nice thing for a center-based location like mine, because the 2 biggest things to keep in mind with capacity are space and equipment availability and then staffing availability. I have a 10-year lease, meaning that I know for the next 10 years what I'm going to be spending on my lease and my rent, and I also know the size of the center and what I have available to offer, as well as what my staffing availability has looked like in previous years and what that will continue to look like. But it can differ for people who, say, maybe traveling medicine or a change in venue, something like that. Your space and equipment availability and then your staffing greatly impact your capacity and you're available to provide services. Mine, like I said, I am stationed in one place. I have a minimum of 10 years that I know that center will be there. So my room, the amount of rooms I have won't change. The amount or the products and supplies that I have won't change unless, for instance, there's a change in suppliers. But my large equipment, the services that I provide, those will not change based on my environment. I really appreciate everybody taking the time to listen. This is something I'm truly passionate about because it's something that I do each day. Forecasting, analysis, trends. I always say, you know your business better than anybody, and you need to be able to tell your story. So thank you so much. Have a great evening and God bless.